Okay, let's get started, everybody. Okay, all right, let's continue our discussion of English. That is, English as an international language. Today, we'll first look at where and how English is used worldwide, and then we'll discuss some of the different reactions, and there are many different reactions that people have to the spread of English. I want to begin by looking at the numbers. The numbers of people that use English across the world as their first language. And I want to look at the number of English speakers so that you get an understanding of how widely English is used. So let me ask you this question. Take a guess. How many people use English as a first language? And by first language, I mean the language that they used at home, that they learned and that they used at home. The answer is about 375 million people throughout the world use English as a first language. Okay, let me repeat the number. 375 million. These are people that live in countries like the United States, for example, where about 69% of the 375 million English speakers live. Let me give you a few other examples of countries where English is the first language. The United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand. Okay, so let's look at another statistic. When we look at the number of all English speakers, in other words, all those who speak some English, that number is about 1 billion worldwide. So 1 billion English speakers. I encourage you to write that number down. 1 billion speakers of English worldwide. 1 in 5. And some guess even 1 in 4 of the world's population has some fluency in English. So I think you can see that the number of English speakers is quite high. But clearly, English is very much an international language. Okay, so now that you have a good idea of the numbers, I'd like to move on to look at this question. What are people using English for? To answer this question, we'll look at 2 major worldwide trends that have an influence on the spread of English. The first trend I'm talking about is globalization. I'm sure you've heard that word before. Globalization. But let me give you a quick definition just to make sure that we all understand. Globalization is the process of operating a business in a lot of countries all over the world. The world, in this word, is referred to as globe. This way of doing business means that economic barriers between countries are disappearing. And these disappearing barriers mean that there is a growing need for people to be able to communicate with members of organizations, colleagues, customers and partners throughout the world, around the globe. Of course, there are many languages being used in international business. Languages like Arabic, Hindi, Japanese. I'm not saying that English is the only language, but I am saying that English is the language that is used most widely. All right. Now that we've covered globalization, let's move to the other trend that influences the use of English, and that is increased use of technology. The United States has been the biggest source of internet developments. Remember now that I said earlier that 69% of the world's native speakers of English are in the United States. So, to be part of an internet company, to read literature about computers and the internet, and to do business on the internet, people need to know English. what I want you to understand here is both the globalization of business and the growth of information technology have created the need for a common language. And that language is English. Okay, so let's change direction now and look at how English is viewed around the world. How do different countries and people view this spread of English? The first opinion is that the spread of English is good for the world. People who believe this argue that English is actually superior to other languages. They say that, for example, that it has the largest and most expressive vocabulary of any of the other languages in the world, and is therefore a better language for communicating ideas. Okay, got that? But by the way, I'm not saying that this opinion is right or wrong. I'm just saying that this opinion exists. We'll discuss right or wrong later. Another point of view is that the spread of English is a benefit because it's neutral. When we look at a country like India, for example, we can understand this opinion. There are at least 33 different regional languages in India. So which one should they use in, say, courtrooms or on legal documents? In India, they have decided to use English so that nobody can feel insulted. People who hold this opinion about English being good because it's neutral also say that English is a benefit as long as it can exist together with other languages. The thinking here is that the spread of English as a second language would allow people from all over the world to communicate with each other. So, again, this is a point of view that says the spread and use of English is no problem. In fact, it's a positive thing. Now let's move on to two of the more, maybe we could say, negative points of view about English. Let's look at these. The first point says that the spread or use of English into non-English speaking countries can actually harm and is actually dangerous. The opinion says that the use of English negatively affects the local language. How does it do this? It changes it. It makes it less pure. In fact, they say it's important to actively protect the local language from the influence of English. The last point of view to look at is very negative. It states that English is not a neutral force, but instead the spread of English is part of a plan with very particular political and economic goals. Let me explain this thinking. People with this point of view say that most of the big governments and corporations in the world use English as their main language. So if everyone in the world speaks English, they have a better chance of influencing or even controlling the people, the countries, and the economies of the world. The negative result, they fear, is that with everyone speaking the same language, everyone around the world will soon be buying the same products, working for the same companies. They fear that individual countries will actually lose their special and unique qualities. So these four opinions that I briefly described give you a good idea of the attitudes around the spread of English globally. The opinions vary, but the one thing they all agree on is it's happening. English is definitely spreading. We'll discuss more about this in the next class. That's it for today.